In the summer of 1882, Trinidad, Colorado was a town that looked calm enough from a distance. Sun-bleached streets, slow-moving trains, the usual frontier dust drifting in the heat. But beneath that quiet surface, something was shifting. Old grudges were waking up, new trouble was rolling in, and the law, such as it was about to be tested in ways no one saw coming. Into this uneasy moment rode Bat Masterson. Fresh off one fight, stepping straight into another, Bat returned to find Trinidad simmering, its jail overflowing, its newspapers at war, and its lawmen circling each other like flint and steel. What followed would shake the town, stain reputations, and push Bat into choices that would echo far beyond Colorado. This is the story of a town on edge, a killing born from ink instead of whiskey, and the moment Bat Masterson began to discover a new kind of weapon, one that didn't need gunpowder. Welcome to Steel and Silk, the life of Bat Masterson. This is Episode 8, The Fuse in Trinidad.
There are towns in the West that never stop trembling, even when the wind is still. Towns built on old grudges and fresh whiskey, where men carry their own brand of justice close to the skin. Trinidad, Colorado, in the summer of 1882 was such a place, quiet to the ear, but restless to the bone. And into that uneasy calm rode Bat Masterson. He had been gone more than 2 weeks, tending to Doc Holliday's troubles up in Denver, trying once again to unstick one of his friends from the gears of the law. Folks read the daily news and saw that Bat had returned home, though some wondered if he'd ever really left. That was the sort of town Trinidad was. Peaceful when it wanted to be, loud when it forgot how. But the peace didn't last. By the time Bat stepped off the train, Trinidad was beginning to draw a new crowd. Not the miners and merchants who built the place, nor the cattlemen drifting up from Texas, but men from the lower country, as the papers called it, tin horn gamblers, bunco sharps, saloon jackals with smooth hands and slick pockets. Most had been run out of Raton in a hard crackdown, and 20 miles north, Trinidad welcomed them with open streets. Low Krieger, Feliciano Vigil, and H.E. Hardy had done their best during Bat's absence, but even a good man can only scoop so much water out of a leaking boat. Hardy, who had once worn the badge, had already quit the force and returned again, his time punching cattle lasting just long enough to convince him the job was better suited to men who liked sleeping under the open sky. The papers begged the council to fill the vacancy, and soon a new face stepped forward. George Goodell, a lawman of stout build and short temper. Goodell wasted no time. He told a knot of gamblers to leave town by Monday. They asked for time to settle their bills, and Goodell, in his new uniform, looked, according to the Democrat, too utterly to issuing orders like he meant them. Even Bat had to admire that. Still, a uniform doesn't clean the streets by itself. As summer settled in, Trinidad's calaboose, run by Sheriff Juan Vigil, began to fill with familiar names. Off the railroad drifts and dusty alleys came characters from Dodge City, Ogallala, Las Vegas, and Leadville. Cornhole Johnny Gallagher, once known along the gambling trails, now found himself fined $25 for vagrancy and sentenced to shovel horse manure on the chain gang. The mighty had fallen. An off-wheeler, John Jefferson Harlan, one of the strongest and most notorious swindlers on the frontier, was hauled in next. A man broad as a buffalo with a grin that fooled many. He had been driven out of Las Vegas under threat of a necktie party, and now stood in Trinidad, sentenced again. But something in that jail wasn't holding. Before long, Off-Wheeler and his crew escaped. Just slipped out and vanished. Sheriff Vigil said little, but editor Olney Newell of the News said plenty, accusing the county officers of carelessness and negligence. A spark was struck. What came next was the kind of slow-burning fuse that only the Old West could produce. Undersheriff M.B. McGraw was not the type to be pushed. In his mind, Newell's criticism was aimed squarely at him. And so, in the pages of the Democrat, he answered, not with denial, but with fire. He called Newell's claims cowardly and willful lies. He accused the editor of hiding behind his desk. He dared him into the street. Newell declined. The editor of the News has no time for street broils, he wrote, but he will be found in the old stand. McGraw wasn't satisfied. He demanded to know the source of the information, the man whispering jailhouse truths in Newell's ear. And when the editor refused to give the name, McGraw struck again. This time, his target wasn't the editor. It was Officer George Goodell. Through the newspaper, McGraw hurled charges so vile they were guaranteed to provoke blood. He accused Goodell of being a pimp for his own wife back in Dodge City, said he gambled away her earnings, said he knew these facts well enough to swear to them. In the West, a man could die for far less. And Trinidad waited, breath held. Bat Masterson had been gone while the papers feuded, and reputations were tossed back and forth like cheap poker chips. Whether Bat could have stopped it, no one knows. But the morning he stepped off the train, August 19th, 1882, the town was already leaning forward, listening for the crack of a pistol. He did not wait long. At 9:10 a.m., in front of Jaffa's Opera House, George Goodell stood with his hands at his sides as Undersheriff McGraw marched toward him. Words were exchanged, too low to hear above the street noise. Then McGraw slapped Goodell across the face, his right hand drifting toward the butt of his pistol. The street fell silent. Goodell moved first. His gun came up in a blur of steel. The first shot smashed through McGraw's arm, sending his revolver clattering to the sidewalk. The second tore into his chest. McGraw staggered into the open doorway of Jaffa's, gasping, "For God's sake, hand me my gun!" Goodell did not stop. He fired again, and again. McGraw fell in a heap, bleeding from 10 wounds. Deputy Hardy rushed in, wrapping his arms around Goodell, fighting to pull the man back from the edge. But Goodell, wild-eyed, dragged Hardy with him, scooped up McGraw's fallen pistol, and fired 2 more rounds. Only then did he come back to himself. Trinidad had seen shootings before, but there was something different about this one. It was not whiskey violence. It was not a midnight ambush. This was a killing born of printed words. McGraw lingered 2 days, then died. A coroner later declared that Goodell had not acted with felonious intent. But the air in Trinidad felt changed. The West had many ways of killing a man. Bullets were the cleanest. Trinidad's papers split along their usual lines. Olney Newell, suddenly shrill with morality, declared the killing lamentable and warned that revolver days were over. Yet this was the same editor who had called for a necktie festival not a month before. Hypocrisy is as Western as dust, I suppose. A.K. Cutting of the Democrat, who had published McGraw's inflammatory tirades, was blamed for stirring the pot too far. He shrugged it off, saying others in town had skeletons rattling in their closets too. Goodell resigned by October and fled Trinidad, leaving behind a cloud of slander and rumor. Once he was gone, Cutting printed every insult he could think of, calling Goodell a murderer and thief. And through all of it, Bat Masterson kept to the side, watching. He made arrests, broke up brawls, lost a diamond ring in a scuffle one December evening. Trinidad was a place where even the lawman's pockets weren't safe. His brother Jim tried to get a job on the police force, but Bat passed him over. Jim worked briefly as a bartender, then finally pinned on a county badge, though not under Bat. The brothers bore the same name, but did not always share the same path. Early in 1883, trouble arrived by train. A man named O.L. Hale, though he used other names, was being escorted by Sheriff Joe Landis of Iowa. Hale was a fugitive, a jailbreaker wanted for forgery and murder. But as the train steamed into Trinidad, two deputies from Salida, Miles Mix and Jesse Brown, met the Iowa sheriff on the platform. They claimed Hale for Colorado. Landis refused. A scuffle broke out loud and fast. The prisoner was dragged away by Mix and Brown with the assistance of Trinidad officers. Among them, the paper said, was Bat Masterson. The story exploded across Colorado and New Mexico. Papers called Mix's crew bunco men, and the entire affair a trick designed to free the fugitive. A scandal burst open on every frontier front page. Bat stayed silent until the Dodge City Times took its swing. Editor Nick Klain, an old enemy, accused Bat of forging papers, lying to a sheriff, and snatching the prisoner by brute force. That was too much. Bat wrote a letter to the Ford County Globe, sharp as a Bowie knife and twice as pointed. He denied the charges flatly, called Klain dishonest, called Dodge City a delectable burg run by vampires and stranglers, and made it clear he had no intention of returning. It was the beginning of a new Bat, a man whose pen could strike just as fiercely as his Colt. Spring brought politics, and Bat allowed his name to stand for marshal again, this time in an open election. He ran on the citizen's ticket. His opponent was Louis Krieger, beloved by Trinidad, steady as an anvil, and known for his appetite as much as his grit. One paper mocked Bat for being a faro banker, saying he was a professional gentleman whose customers made deposits for keeps. Another warned that Trinidad must choose between the gamblers and the churches. When the votes were counted, Bat lost in a landslide. It was the last election he would ever enter. 5 days later, on April 8th, Trinidad gathered for a foot race. Maxwell of New Mexico versus Court Thompson of Denver. 60 yards, winner take all. Bat bet on Thompson. Perhaps that was the beginning of the trouble. As the two men took their marks, Thompson bent down to tie his shoe. The starter fired the gun. Maxwell leapt ahead. The crowd roared. Thompson ran hard, but he was losing ground. And in that instant, faster than thought, Bat Masterson's foot shot out. Maxwell went down and chaos erupted. The race was voided, bets canceled. Thompson fled town. Bat arrested Maxwell and the stakeholder, Billy Martin, for fraud, then rearrested Maxwell when he tried to claim victory by forfeit. No one ever forgot that moment. Some said Bat acted for fairness. Others said he acted for money. In the West, those lines blur easily. When Trinidad swore in its new officers, Lou Krieger again wore the marshal's badge. Jim Masterson returned to the police force under him. Bat Masterson did not attend the ceremony. 5 days earlier, he had boarded a train north. The advertiser gave his departure a single, quiet line. No fanfare, no farewell. And so Bat left Trinidad much as he had lived in it, moving in and out of the town's history like a shadow, stirring up dust and stories, leaving behind controversy, gun smoke, and the scent of a man who wanted order but played by rules of his own making. He had not found what he was looking for there. But the West was wide, and Bat had miles yet to go. The West has a way of calling a man back to the very places he swears he'll never see again. Bat Masterson once wrote that he had no wish to return to the delectable burg of Dodge City. Yet the frontier has never cared much for a man's wishes. It cares for loyalties, debts, and unfinished business. And in the spring of 1883, Dodge City came calling again, this time through the voice of a friend. His name was Luke Short, and trouble had finally found him. Luke had returned to Dodge months earlier, taking over the Long Branch Saloon from Chalk Beeson and joining his partner Bill Harris in running what was, by all accounts, the crown jewel of Front Street, a place where cowboys unburdened themselves of trail money, gamblers unburdened themselves of honesty, and a man could lose his wages, his pride, or both before midnight. Normally, such things passed without notice in Dodge, but 1883 brought one of those political storms that rolled through the cowtown every few years, leaving bruised egos and broken alliances scattered like debris. On one side stood the old Dodge City gang, Jim Kelly, the Globe, and the saloon men who had shaped the rough and ready Dodge of the 1870s. Their candidate for mayor was Bill Harris. On the other side stood the reformers, Mike Sutton, Nick Klain of the Times, and the new mayoral candidate, Larry Dager, backed by the stubborn and powerful A.B. Webster. Dager won the election. And what followed was the kind of reform only politicians can invent. Moral on paper, profitable in practice, and aimed squarely at the Long Branch. City ordinances were passed against prostitution, vagrancy, gambling. In other words, against the very oxygen Dodge City breathed. Similar laws had existed before, but this time they were enforced selectively and aggressively. Luke Short didn't mind paying fines. Frontier vice ordinances were simply taxes by another name. But when 3 of his singers were arrested while the girls in Webster's saloon next door sat on customers' laps without interruption, well, Luke smelled a rat. And the rat, as usual, was political. Luke Short was a small man, 5'6", light as a breeze, faster than lightning when pushed. A small package, Bat later called him, but one of great dynamic force. When Luke strapped on his guns and walked toward the city jail to demand fair treatment, City Clerk Lou Hartman saw him coming, saw the brace of pistols, saw the Texan's hard-set jaw, and panicked. Hartman drew first and missed. Luke drew second and didn't. Dust kicked up around the 2 men, bullets cutting the air. Hartman fired once more and fled, stumbling off the high plank sidewalk. Luke's return shot whistled past him as he pitched headlong into the street, lucky to be frightened, not dead. Thinking he'd killed the man, Luke retreated to the Long Branch, fortified the door, loaded a shotgun, and refused to rest. All night he stood behind the barricade, watching for the approach of men who wanted him gone. By morning, cooler heads convinced him Hartman was alive. Luke surrendered peacefully, unarmed. And that's when they arrested him again. Charged him with assault, then with vagrancy, then with being undesirable. No trial, no counsel, no pretense. They took Luke Short and every gambler they could round up and marched them at gunpoint to the depot. Mayor Dager, Marshal Bridges, Under-Sheriff Singer, Webster, Tom Nixon, Brick Bond, they were all there, 25 men in all. Luke was given a choice of trains, east or west. He chose east, bound for Kansas City. And Dodge City breathed a sigh of triumph. But they should have known better. Luke Short was no man to stay gone. Luke arrived in Kansas City and sought out Bat Masterson at once. Bat came as he always did, quickly, quietly, without hesitation. The two met at the Marble Hall, a plush gambling house where men won big, lost big, and told even bigger lies. Charlie Bassett joined them at the table, old friend of Bat's, former Dodge City Marshal, and as steady a hand as the West ever produced. Luke laid out the story. Bat listened. Bassett nodded. Then Bat leaned back, the cigar smoke rising around him, and spoke the words that began one of the strangest chapters in frontier history. First, we'll get the governor. Bat had learned a thing or two about governors during his escapade to save Doc Holliday. If public pressure wouldn't move a politician, embarrassment might. Luke boarded a train for Topeka. The Dodge City War was underway. Governor George Washington Glick listened carefully as Luke Short laid out his complaint. He summoned the Ford County court clerk to verify Luke's story, and the clerk did so without hesitation. When Glick wired Sheriff Hinkle in Dodge asking for an explanation, he received back an answer dripping with arrogance. The act of compelling the parties to leave was simply to avoid disorder. The city is quiet. All is fine. Glick did not agree. He wrote back a blistering letter, one that might have peeled paint off the marshal's office. If the mayor had indeed compelled citizens to leave town without due process, Glick said, then the mayor was unfit for office. If the sheriff could not protect citizens equally, he was derelict. If force was needed to restore order, Glick would send it, militia, arms, ammunition, and if necessary, he would replace the officials of Dodge City altogether. Sheriff Hinkle, failing to read the room, responded with another clueless message. The feeling of the people is strong against Short. If he returns, trouble will ensue. Most sheriffs try to prevent trouble. Dodge cities seem to promise it. Meanwhile, newspapers across the country exploded with headlines. The Dodge City War. Gunmen gather in Kansas City. Masterson and Arp to lead the invasion. Some of it was nonsense. Much of it, not so much. By early June, reinforcements began slipping into Kansas. Some came because they liked Luke Short. Some because they owed Bat. Some because they couldn't resist the scent of a good fight. Wyatt Earp, Texas Jack Vermillion, Dan Tipton, Johnny Millsap, Johnny Green, grizzled men with reputations sharper than the knives on their belts. Bat himself was in and out, moving quickly between Colorado and Kansas, gathering men, making arrangements, preparing for whatever came next. Dodge City panicked. Sheriff Hinkle wired the governor in a frenzy. When a rumor spread that Bat and Luke were arriving on the cannonball train, Hinkle met it with 50 armed men. The cannonball arrived empty. Panic rarely improves judgment. Wyatt Earp arrived first. He stepped off the train flanked by 4 hard-eyed gunfighters. Special policeman Dave Morrow, Webster's own man, took one look at the group and deputized them on the spot. Wyatt posted his men across Front Street like chess pieces. Rumor whispered that more of Short's allies had slipped into town. Charlie Bassett, Shotgun Collins, Frank McLean, Neil Brown. The Webster faction felt the walls closing in. They sent a frantic telegram to Governor Glick begging for troops, claiming Dodge was overrun with desperate characters. The governor sent no troops. He sent his attorney general, Thomas Moonlight. Moonlight arrived to find Dodge City strangely calm, the calm that settles when both sides realize bloodshed has no profit in it. Webster, seeing his support crumble, did the sensible thing. He sent for Wyatt Earp, hoping to negotiate before his own men fled the battlefield. Wyatt listened. Then he presented his terms. Luke Short and Bat Masterson would be allowed to return. Luke would resume control of the Long Branch. There would be peace enforced on both sides. Webster agreed it was over, or as over as anything ever gets in Dodge City. Wyatt wired Bat and Luke the news, and the next morning, June 7th, 1883, Luke Short and Bat Masterson rode triumphantly back into Dodge. Their friends met them at the depot, shook their hands, slapped their backs. Their enemies? They disappeared like prairie hens in a storm. The Globe advertised the flight of one such coward in glorious detail. As soon as Bat alighted from the train, Mike Sutton ran for Gospel Ridge and remained there until a truce was made. Another paper quipped, "When Dodge becomes too hot for Mike Sutton, hell itself would be considered a cool place, a desirable summer resort." In the days that followed, Dodge City relaxed its grip on its own throat. Gambling resumed. Dance halls reopened. Men who'd sworn to shoot each other now drank side by side. The Attorney General even organized a militia-like club called the Glick Guards, mixing men from both factions, as if to remind them that peace requires practice. And then came the photograph. A pose that would echo across centuries. 7 men standing in a line like a legend waiting for a name. Luke Short, arms folded. Bat Masterson, hat cocked. Wyatt Earp, steady as stone. Charlie Bassett, Frank McLean, Neil Brown, and W.F. Pettyon. Someone later called it the Dodge City Peace Commission. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it wasn't. What mattered was simple. Their work was done. There was no bloodshed. Dodge City had been restored by presents, not pistols. 3 days later, Bat Masterson and Wyatt Earp boarded a westbound train. They were headed for Silver City, New Mexico, where rumors of fresh silver strikes stirred old dreams. They had come to Dodge to stop a war. Now they were gone again, drifting into the horizon like men who never linger, where the dust begins to settle. There are towns a man leaves behind, and towns that never quite leave him. For Bat Masterson, Dodge City was the latter, a place that clung like dust to his boots and memory alike. He had fought in her streets, bet in her saloons, bled for her sheriffs, and defended her honor more times than most men change coats. And though he had sworn more than once that he was through with Dodge, some things, loyalty, pride, unfinished business, always pulled him back. The Dodge City War had ended without bloodshed, and for a moment, Bat thought perhaps the town had changed. But towns have long memories, and the people who live in them even longer. And so the tale of Bat Masterson and Dodge City was not finished. When the dust of the Short Webster trouble settled, Bat rode west with Wyatt Earp. But by September of 1883, he was back again. Some in Dodge welcomed him warmly, older friends who had forgiven his sudden gunplay back in '81 and who now saw him restored in reputation. The Globe even printed a rumor that Bat planned to enter the mercantile business, a notion so absurd that Bat likely laughed aloud reading it. He had not come back to sell dry goods. He had come to help a friend. Pat Sugru, stalwart and steady, was running for sheriff against Fred Singer. And Singer had the support of 2 of Bat's favorite adversaries, Mike Sutton and Nick Klain. That alone was enough for Bat. He fought hard for Sugru, arguing with such fervor along the cattle trails and board sidewalks that people began whispering that Bat must be Pat's chosen deputy. Sugru denied the rumor with grace, but he didn't deny Bat's competence, only his residency. Still, the mere presence of Masterson in Dodge shook his political enemies. They accused him of secretly running the Globe, of writing editorials, of dictating policy. The Globe has long needed a brainy editor, quipped the Times, and Bat Masterson is gaining distinction. The jab was meant as mockery. It landed instead as truth. Whatever else Bat was becoming, he was learning he had a talent for the printed word, and a sharp one at that. Bat slipped back to Trinidad before the election, just for a time, but when the day came, he returned to Dodge with Wyatt Earp at his side. Their mere presence had a moral effect, wrote the Globe, and that effect was enough. Pat Sugru won the sheriff's seat. The old guard, Bat's guard, was back on top. A few days later, Bat headed south to Fort Worth with Luke Short. The victory in Dodge had been bloodless, perhaps miraculous, and now Luke sought new prospects in Texas. Bat joined him, more out of friendship than ambition. From Fort Worth, Bat returned to Trinidad and found a fresh controversy waiting for him. Lou Krieger, Trinidad's city marshal, had traveled into Kansas to retrieve a murder suspect named Ed Hibbard. He returned in triumph, parading Hibbard through town to applause from local papers. But Bat couldn't resist, not when Singer, of all people, was along on the arrest. He wrote to the Trinidad News claiming that Singer, not Krieger, had secured the prisoner, and that Krieger, being a Colorado officer, had no jurisdiction in Kansas at all. Krieger does not know a requisition from an acquisition, Bat wrote, or a habeas corpus from a hocus pocus. Krieger fired back. Bat returned the volley. Soon their dispute filled the pages of both Dodge and Trinidad newspapers like a traveling show. The Dodge City Democrat mocked the whole affair. Bat shows himself almost as adept with the pen as with the six-shooter. It was meant half as praise, half as warning. A man like Bat didn't need bullets to draw blood. The winter of '84 brought more familiar faces to Trinidad, Wyatt Earp and Johnny Green among them, and soon after, Bat drifted back to Dodge City for township elections. The Democrat greeted him warmly. Bat looks as smooth, pretty, and guileless as of old. By February, Bat was again dividing his time between Trinidad and Dodge. When he tired of courtrooms and political wrangling, he returned to what he knew best, gambling halls lit with kerosene and hope. He helped organize a baseball team, getting himself elected vice president. He played in a football scrimmage, only to be knocked backward by a well-placed kick. A gentle reminder, the paper called it. Even Bat had limits. For the 4th of July celebrations, Bat served on the foot race committee. He judged races with Bill Tillman, watched Hogans and white men sprint across dusty grounds, and later penned an early sports report of a controversial horse race, calling the doctor judges fop-tailed non-entities, whose heads were too small for judges on a racetrack. No one wrote quite like Bat Masterson. Not every week in Dodge was fun and games. In September, a man named A.J. Howard, once a hotel clerk, now a cook with ambitions beyond his apron, decided he would settle old grievances with Bat using a carving knife nearly 2 feet long. Howard found Bat in a saloon. Someone shouted a warning. Bat rose, calm, unhurried, and reached not for a revolver, but for the nearest weapon at hand, a chair. He swung once, leveled the man, and would have finished the job had bystanders not intervened. Howard stood trial, not Bat. A $25 fine and a few days in lockup were punishment enough for challenging the wrong man. By 1884, politics in Dodge City had become a battlefield of its own. Bat aligned with Republicans, but only when they aligned with him. The Times mocked him, the Prohibitionists despised him, and his enemies multiplied faster than his friends. Then came Coal House, an anonymous article in the Globe attacking several Republican candidates. Klain insisted Bat had written it. Bat denied it, barely, and offered to prove every word of it true, but words alone would not satisfy him. And so Bat Masterson did something entirely new. Bat launched his own newspaper, a single-issue, single-editor, single-purpose bombshell called Vox Populi. Bold, defiant, unrestrained. He called Nick Klain a fossil dug from Missouri mud, depicted Sutton as a chameleon who shifted colors depending on whiskey or water, mocked Swan as a petty thief, labeled Burns a parasite, and referred to a host of others as reptiles, hybrids, and miscreants unworthy of civilized company. An entire community roasted in print by one man. The Globe called Bat a promising editor. The Trinidad News said he possessed real journalistic ability. But the howls came from those he had named, and from the ballot box. Every candidate Vox Populi opposed was defeated. Then Bat closed the paper with a flourish. The Vox Populi is no more, but it says nothing it is sorry for. Nick Klain tried to strike back with humor. A story of Bat being fleeced in a mule-pulling contest by a pair of country boys. Bat ignored it. But when Klain referred a lady to Reverend W.B. Masterson, Bat responded publicly and devastatingly. I am a gambler by profession, he wrote. Our esteemed postmaster knew this. He lacks many of those elements that constitute a gentleman. The Globe printed it. The town roared. Klain stewed. The feud between Bat and the moral element had become the stuff of legend. 1884 was a grim year for men Bat had known. Ben Thompson and King Fisher were ambushed in a San Antonio theater, shot to pieces from hiding by men, too frightened to face them honestly. Old Tom Nixon, once Bat's enemy, now a deputy, was killed by mysterious Dave Mather on the sidewalk outside the Opera House Saloon. Bat testified at Mather's trial. Mather walked free. Life and death in Dodge City followed their own rules. Then came Albert Griffin, editor, temperance leader, and a man who believed Dodge City lay somewhere between Gomorrah and the doorstep of hell. Griffin arrived promising to close the saloons, promising to remain until every viper is crushed from existence, which might have gone well until he returned with the Attorney General. The town bristled. A mob formed. And standing between that mob and two terrified reformers was one man, Bat Masterson. He held them back, kept them alive, urged them to leave while they could. Griffin later admitted Bat saved him, but with no warmth. In his paper, he called Bat dangerous, vicious, charismatic, and unstable. The West had little patience for temperance men. Bat had none at all. By early 1886, Dodge was drowning in tension, political, economic, moral. Then came the blizzards, the cold, the hunger. Then came the fire that destroyed half of Front Street. The town was breaking apart, and on March 10th, Bat Masterson broke it further. Without warning, he filed complaints against every saloon and druggist in Dodge City. Warrants flew. Bartenders were arrested. Doors slammed shut. For the first time in memory, Dodge City went dry. The Democrat reported it with disbelief. The Times smelled politics, claiming Bat's move was a ploy to block A.B. Webster's bid for mayor after several saloon men shifted allegiance to the temperance camp. Others called it blackmail. Bat didn't deny it. Not really. Whatever his motive, the town was stunned. In the end, it didn't matter. The trials resulted in hung juries. Webster was elected mayor. The reform element took control. And Bat Masterson twice burned by Dodge City, made up his mind. For the second time in his life, he walked away from the delectable burg. The Times printed the news quietly. Bat Masterson and his gang went west on the afternoon train. No celebration, no farewell. Just a departure. A man leaving a town that had outgrown him, or perhaps a town he had outgrown. Bat would go on. So would Dodge. But the era that had bound them together, the era of lawmen and gamblers, of painted women and trail herds, of saloon lights shining through frontier dust, was fading into memory. And Bat Masterson, the man who had once ruled Front Street with courage, swagger, and no small amount of mischief, slipped into the next chapter of his wandering life.
Trinidad had always been a town with a short fuse, but in 1882 it burned hotter than most. A killing sparked by words, a jail that couldn't hold its prisoners, and a lawman learning that the frontier was changing faster than any six-shooter could keep up. Through it all, Bat Masterson stood at the edge of the fire, watching, choosing, adapting. Here at Chronicles of the Old West, we bring these moments back to life. One dusty street, one hard choice, one legend at a time. If this episode pulled you deeper into Bat's world, share it with someone who still believes history deserves to be told with heart. Bat's journey is far from over. Join us next time for the continuing saga of Steel and Silk, the life of Bat Masterson.